Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Michelle Graff, and I'm the editor-in-chief at National Jeweler. I'm pleased to welcome you to the latest episode of My Next Question, National Jeweler's webinar series sponsored by Rdi Diamonds. Today's session is hosted by our senior editor, Ashley Davis, and features three guests, Beanie Major, Randi Molofsky, and Jen Cullen Williams. Before I turn it over to Ashley to get the webinar started, I just wanted to let attendees know that if they have a question, they can type it into the Zoom Q&A box at the bottom of your screens. I will be back on at the end of the discussion to facilitate the Q&A. Also, today's session is being recorded and will be available on the National Jeweler website this coming Friday, January 29th. Now I'll turn it over to Ashley and her guests. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle, and welcome everyone to Fine Jewelry Trends in the New Year. I'm honored to introduce today's very knowledgeable panel, beginning with Beanie Major. Beanie is a jewelry advisor for private clients. She has a BA in jewelry design and silversmithing, which led to her role as part of the design team at renowned British jeweler Sean Lee. There, she launched In Detail, which began as a content platform to promote the best jewelry worldwide. Today, this has evolved into a personal shopping service for clients seeking out design-led engagement rings and fine jewelry. Randi Molofsky is the co-founder of For Future Reference, a fine jewelry brand development agency specializing in sales, marketing, and public relations for independent designers. She is the author of A Girl's Guide to Buying Diamonds. Her 20-year career includes work for top consumer and trade magazines, organizations, and brands including Gemfields. Jen Cullen Williams is a communications and PR consultant who launched her own company in 2019 after more than a decade at PR firms like Luxury Brand Group. Jen has worked with leading industry companies in jewelry, luxury, fashion, insurance, and lifestyle retail markets, as well as business-to-business, live and digital trade shows, events, and platforms. She's on the boards for JCK, WJA, and the WJA Los Angeles chapter. Woo, very long resumes there, but I kept it brief. So let's get to the fun part, to some questions. Even during the pandemic, we saw a high demand for fine jewelry. So let's talk about some of the top trends that we should expect to see in 2021. To start off, let's talk a little bit about personalized jewelry and kind of where that's headed and how designers are interpreting that this year. And anyone can start us off.
I'll get started. I mean, I think personalized is still huge. I think especially in a year like the year we had, it's not that people necessarily need an excuse to buy fine jewelry, because I think they do see it as an investment and something that they'll have for a long time to come. It's not a trend-driven piece. But if there's a little bit of personalization in it, a little bit of something that makes the wearer feel even more connected to the piece and gives them a memory of a place or a time when they purchased it, I think that's going to give them that little bit of extra incentive to make that investment. And, you know, I'm seeing personally things as simple as an initial, which are still hugely popular, whether a signet ring or a pendant, but birthdays, birthstones, zodiacs, all of these things which, you know, aren't incredibly personalized, but they're just personalized enough that it makes the purchaser feel special and feel a significance, a personal significance with it that will kind of push them over the edge of making the purchase.
Okay.
And I would also say on the personalization, I totally agree. I think the obvious things of like someone's name, your child or something like that, those are still out there. I think that's been a trend for a while. Where it's kind of going is that we're giving more choices. Like there's more builder platforms built into websites. You know, normally you could do it in store. You could mix and match and style in store. Now you have to do it online. And so I think showing like different types of charms that might have symbolic meanings. I mean, almost like the Pandora concept, but in more high-end chic jewelry for layering. I think that's where the personalization comes in, is the options of how to put it together.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, in the UK, we're seeing personalization go even further. We're seeing a lot of brands who are really sort of creating, I guess it kind of goes more into the fully bespoke category. So I think in the US, we see a lot of story building. You've got brands such as Foundry, Marla, who are, it's all about adding on, building those stories. And in the UK, I think we're seeing a lot of people who are, for example, there's a jewelry brand called Rebus who makes signet rings, and clients come in and they literally have their story sort of engraved onto the surface of that piece. So I think there's definitely a demand and an appetite for things that feel very, very personal. And I guess it's nothing new in jewelry. We've seen it in jewelry since, humans wore pieces and, since the beginning of time. But I'd say, yeah, in the UK here, there's definitely a huge appetite for bespoke.
I think that what's kept the trend fresh, since it isn't really a new trend, is just the fact that designers are really incorporating it into their signature looks. So I think that's what's been fun and doesn't make it feel redundant to do a new letter charm, because they're doing it in a way that's very specific to their brand. So I think that that's what's keeping it kind of noteworthy today. And then to move on to fine jewelry categories, are you guys noticing any dominance between earrings and necklaces, bracelets, and rings that people are really shopping for right now?
I can answer definitely. I think it's the earrings and the necklaces, because they're the things that show on virtual calls. I also think that bangles, I still think they're going to be popular and people are still going to want to wear bracelets. It's a little less when you're at home or at a desk. It's a little clunky. If you're on a call, it can make a lot of noise. So I think, the stackables that kind of clink together, they're fine when you're in a meeting because people can kind of see it and still hear. But I think on video technology calls, it's kind of a nuisance. So definitely the studies have shown, from the buying categories and the retailers I've been talking to, they've said earrings and necklaces of all sorts have done really well. And, rings and engagement rings and things like that, other categories. Watches have also been really strong.
Yeah, I think people behave differently towards different jewelry categories. I think with our earrings, we tend to mix and match them quite a lot, depending on our hairstyle, the occasion, that kind of thing. Whereas maybe we're more loyal to our rings, which we tend to reach for the same ones every day. They maybe have higher value, higher significance. And I also think, with earrings and necklaces, to a certain extent, it's a bit more sort of one size fits all. So at the moment, when people can't get to the shops, it's very easy to imagine what that pair of earrings will look like on you. It's always a category that's sort of outperformed other categories for the online sales. And as Jen said, it looks good in your selfie, looks good on your Zoom call.
That's such a good point. You don't really have to size the earring or the necklace.
I think, funny enough, obviously I think these things are true about the Zoom calls. Personally, as a showroom owner and as representing independent designers, we've still seen growth in rings and bangles, especially hard bangles. Specifically, that's been a huge category for us. And I think that's also because a little bit, Ashley, of what you're saying. I think designers are really putting their stamp on hard bangles these days. And whatever that may be, they're putting a real designer signature on it, which is making them more attractive to a clientele who understands fine designer jewelry. But what I will say about rings is, although it's not as easy to buy a ring online and sizing, whatever, I think that is what people will still wear around their house, weirdly, whether it's because you can then look down at your own hands and derive some sort of pleasure from seeing yourself wearing them. And I think people, tend to maybe keep their rings on. we've still seen an overwhelming desire for beautiful rings, especially gemstone driven rings. And I think that's, you know, if you are sitting at your computer all day typing, that's what you're going to be staring directly at yourself, is you're going to be looking at your own rings. And so if you're not a person who zooms all day long, and you're not getting that satisfaction of seeing that, I think you kind of want to look down at your own hands and see something beautiful as well. So we've still seen tremendous growth in that category from our designers.
Okay, great. So layering, I feel like, has been a massive trend. And I'm wondering if you guys can just talk a little bit about that, kind of how that trend is coming to life and how designers are interpreting that.
Should I start? I think what I really love about this trend is it doesn't necessarily demand newness, and that is on the behalf of the consumer, who can choose pieces from their existing collection to mix in with new pieces, but also I think for the jewelers as well, who increasingly I think are trying to keep their collections tighter. You know, over the last years, I think we've seen this constant demand for newness, and actually when it comes to this, it's less about creating new pieces and more about thinking about how you style them. So creating those looks for your clients, maybe using pieces that have been in the collection for years, but suddenly saying, well, look, you can wear them like this. They look great together like this. Or, you know, with your grandmother's chain or pearls or whatever it is. So I think this is a trend that I think is really positive for the industry.
I was going
Jen,
yeah, or Randi, I had more just, you know, how layering sort of goes into how you can market. I mean, it's just a huge opportunity to get add-on purchases. And I think that there's some designers out there in the jewelry space and retailers that are doing it really well. They're styling on their websites. They're showing how to wear it. They're using great photography on real people on how to style and mix and match. And I think that's a really great thing. And I know that there's a couple brands, even outside of the industry, that are doing, and this is not new, but it's something that the jewelry industry doesn't always do, but it's not just the suite of exactly matchy, it's putting a combination and kind of helping your customer along by showing them kind of a look that they could just straight click and buy versus doing, like, having them to have to do it. And, you know, some people want to do that and that should be available, but giving them that option of, hey, I can just click and buy and get this whole look. And I know that the 16-inch works with the 19-inch with the 20, whatever. And it's just a one-click shop. I think that is where this industry should be headed. And it's really fun to do that from a designing perspective.
I've noticed that on websites like Elaine23's website, like I can buy my Foundry, Beanie already mentioned, like I can buy the a full look with kind of a few charms all ready to go if I would rather just like have the look styled for me. But I can also do an individual style as well. I think that's a great point. Randi, do you have anything to add? I think you're muted. Sorry, Randi.
Oh, sorry, there we go. I think another thing that's great is the mixture now of textures, colors, materials. Whereas before it was a lot of like, you would really only see like delicate gold necklaces paired together, and maybe there'd be a little drop or a little something. And now I think there's a real mix, and I think that's something also, along with what Jen's saying, is a great thing for designers, brands, industry to explore, because that mix of maybe a gemstone bead with a gold chain with pearls with whatever, I think that, you know, that mix and that material mix is also something that's kind of a little bit newer, and people are exploring that a little more as well. And so I think that just gives especially stores ample opportunity to say, this, just because you wear such and such every day doesn't mean you can't mix it up with this and this and this. And I think it just gives a lot of opportunities for selling and for keeping customers having a really diverse jewelry wardrobe as well.
Yeah. And I know that people hear this ad nauseum, but I do think Instagram is just so amazing in that way of, because like a lot of Randi's brands like Brent Neal, Harwell Godfrey, we see the, and, you know, we're following them and we see them every day and what they're wearing and styling. And so we can picture ourselves in it. I think that's just one of the major keys. It felt like everybody had charms in 2020, which was surprisingly really, really fun. What is happening on the charm front? Is that still going to be happening? Is it going to taper off?
I mean, I think it's still going to be happening. Look, at the end of the day, this is the perfect entry item for pretty much any brand to offer. It's a really easy way for a customer to have an introduction to maybe an aspirational brand or someone that they covet something, and to start small, start with a charm is the perfect way to really make that introduction. And, you know, there's a million different options, obviously, a million ways to do it. I think, you know, the old idea of the enhancer and being able to clip on and off and add charms to different things has come back in such a huge way. I think that has allowed people also to just buy a charm, not have to buy a necklace with it, not have to invest in the chain, which is so expensive right now with gold prices so high. So again, it just offers an opportunity for a purchase, especially a self-purchase, that allows you to, you know, get invested in a brand in a fun, easy way that's very interchangeable.
Yes.
I personally love it. I've been actually digging through my jewelry box. I found, you know, a grandma's pendant mixed with some new products and things like that. And I've just been like adding to it. So I think it's a huge opportunity for sales. And going back to that last point about you need the photography, that is so key. You have to style it and show how it can be worn. Cause I think sometimes, you know, a more traditional type of consumer or shopper may feel like, oh, I would never, like I have a lot of friends that were like, oh, I'd never even think to put those together. So I think when you can show them how it can be done, and I think it's really great when it's someone from the brand, whether it's the designer or the store owner or someone actually speaks and shares. There's a lot of designers that do that now that are just talking in the camera and they show how they're styling the pieces. I mean, I've been, you know, watching Instagram and like actually clicked and bought some of their things just by doing that. So I think there's a huge opportunity to share the story and the building the story.
Any thoughts, Beanie, or do you think we have it covered?
Just when I saw this question, it made me smile because when I first started my platform in 2011, I was actually commissioned by the World Gold Council to write. They wanted a sort of gallery type feature, 10 gold charms. I couldn't find 10 gold charms. We had to scrap the feature. It just, you know, I think there were lots of maybe companies doing silver charms and that kind of thing, but I couldn't find them for love nor money. And when I saw that question, I thought, who isn't doing charms now? So I think it's really great. I mean, again, you know, they go right back. I have a charm bracelet which belonged to my grandmother and has really beautiful sort of enamel charms and that kind of thing on. So I think that's something that are incredibly, you know, lovely to purchase. And yeah, it just really made me smile when I saw that question, because it's quite interesting to think about the sort of lifespan of these trends, and just to think that in 2011 that wasn't really around.
They feel like they cycle so quickly sometimes, to me. Like,
so many vintage charms out there. I mean, if you look at Gem Gossip, Danielle's page, I mean, she'll take a picture, and I mean, she's got probably thousands of charms, and they're amazing. And they are, you know, and they mean something. And she's like, these ones are not for sale. These are my personal collection. So I think, you know, thinking about that too, that there's the opportunity to sell like a vintage or a state piece or something like that, and mix it, or your grandmother's or something that you've inherited, and mix it with a new piece from one of the designers. I think that's an amazing thing to do. And I think it's really cool that that's, you know, the way that we're moving forward, that there's an individual aspect to it and that personalization. And I think that will only continue to grow.
Okay. And what kind of materials are we seeing right now that feel the most prevalent? And anything from metals to stones, enamel, etc. What are you guys seeing out there?
I mean, look, I'm seeing a lot of color still. Color is still really high on a lot of people's wish lists. And I think what's been great that's happened, and this has been happening over the last several years, is there's been a real return to semi-precious in fine designer jewelry as well, allowing people to kind of open their minds up a little bit about what kinds of materials can be used, and whether that's cool, like lace agates that have tons of pattern, or, you know, other opaque or semi-opaque stones that have a lot of movement and a lot of texture to them. I think those have come back. I mean, look, we're seeing tons of beaded necklaces. We're seeing, you know, I think cocktail rings with color are still hugely popular. And so for me, there's a lot of different materials that are maybe non-specifically coming back, but I do find color to be really important, whether that's an enamel, which is still kind of going strong right now. I mean, literally everywhere I'm seeing neon enamel. And I think has been huge. I'm not sure how long that will last, or if that will be something that continues on as kind of an evergreen situation, or if it's something that feels a little trendier, but that's certainly everywhere right now as well. So I just think that kind of bold approach to color has been really important the last couple of years. Maybe that's a response to how expensive gold is. You know, I think designers are looking for a way to think about their price points and think about what they're be able to sell for. And if you can reduce the gold a little bit, but add this excitement with this pop of color, then that's something that they can do to really catch people's eyes and not have the piece cost $1 million, which is important as well.
Okay.
I think what's really interesting is, I think I 100% with everything Randi said, and I feel it's about the execution of the materials. So as you said, people are using sort of beads that, you know, I sort of recognize from playing with as a child, mixing that in with fine and precious materials. And you see someone like Hemile using, you know, pickup sticks, you know, that they saw their children playing with during the first lockdown to create a brooch. But, you know, it's still, you know, they're top of the market, and, you know, it still has this really fine quality to it. So it's very much in the sort of execution. And I think people are experimenting with color, with stones, with enamel, with, all different effects on the metal. And I think it's really exciting. And I think mixture of materials as well, you know, really going beyond just sticking to one, really seeing a sort of mixed media approach, if you like.
I did have one designer, Jade Trout, tell me recently for a story I was doing on bridal trends that she has seen a rise in mixed metal for brides stacks. So like a white gold engagement ring with a yellow gold band, maybe a couple of yellow gold bands, which actually really surprised me. Yeah,
I was going to say too, I love, and I'm seeing this like a lot, I know it's not totally new, but where you see like an actual stone, like a rock, that's smooth, that has inlaid different gemstones and different patterns. There's a couple brands that's kind of their key identity, but then I see it in enamel, and I'm seeing it in different motifs and hearts, but those inlaid, you know, or baguettes or whatever, but it's, I think, kind of using different objects as part of the mix is really fun to see, and kind of gives that organic, you know, stone to rock feel that is exciting and feels really, I don't know, unique to what we sometimes see of like just a, you know, a setting and a stone, you know, with a setting. It's nice to kind of see like when there's mixes and matches of things. Yeah.
I'm curious if you guys think that a lot of the chunky gold that we've been seeing, like, which I personally wear a lot of and super love, but like, you know, just the gold chains and lots of gold hoop earrings and all of that, if that will kind of, if that will change a bit with gold being so expensive right now. Chunky bands, like kind of just the all gold look, if you guys foresee where you foresee that going.
Accessories market, I mean, on the runways and stuff, the virtual runways, there was a lot of huge, big, chunky gold, but it was not gold, real gold. And I don't think that I mean, there's probably consumers that would buy that in real chunky gold, but I think realistically, they're going to buy it in costume for that like giant look, but then they'll buy the real gold, like Huggies or whatever to wear with it. That big look is popular. It does have a presence on a digital platform and that kind of thing. I don't think it's going to translate into actual gold because I just don't think people are going to invest that heavy on like, you know, a big giant collar of a thing. But the gold herringbone necklaces and stuff have been really popular, and you know, and the paperclip chains and all the mix and matches of the chains seems to make sense and seems to be still popular even with the pricing.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not seeing like, I mean, from my perspective, in terms of the brands that I work with, we're not seeing really a lot of pushback on big, large scale gold jewelry. I mean, not those costume looks that Jen is talking about, obviously, but, you know, investment pieces like hard bangles, cocktail rings, hoop earrings, like this Brent Neal pair that I'm wearing today, things like that. I think people still see as investment, and they still see as things that will last forever. Yellow is still by far and away our #1 category, yellow gold jewelry. It's our most requested, whether it's by an editor or by a customer. But we are definitely seeing a little bit of a return to two-tone. Brent Neal just made an incredible two-tone knot ring, which is one of her signatures, and people kind of went crazy for it. And so, look, I think things like that are really smart. It's smart to keep that in your arsenal, because there certainly will be that woman who walks into your store who owns a lot of white and doesn't want to be told that white isn't cool. And that's not the way to go about it. The way to go about it is say, let's start working some yellow into your jewelry wardrobe so that so that you can wear both, so that you can take this trend and wear it, but still feel comfortable wearing your existing jewelry. And I think having some two-tone on hand is the perfect way to kind of make that transition and help people start to buy in a different direction without offending them.
And so to turn a little bit to the bridal market, what are just the general trends that you guys are seeing there in engagement rings? Do you want to start us off with that one, Beanie?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I think, well, this is sort of part of the market that I launched my personal shopping with. I would say that I work in quite a niche part of the market. So people tend to have their starting budgets about £10,000, which I think is around $14,000. And they very much tend to be looking for sort of design-led engagement rings. They tend to be looking for sort of independent jewelry brands. That said, I've found in 2020 there has been a bit of a duality going on, and that is, on the one hand, people coming back to or not coming back, but certainly my clients coming back to wanting something maybe a bit more classic, the focus being on the stone, simplicity, thinking, okay, well, maybe we don't know how long we're going to be locked down for, thinking a bit more long term, versus people who are really changing their perceptions about what an engagement ring should be. And those people are looking for very much design-led engagement rings. They want something different. They want something that's going to stand out from their friends. They like to be part of the process. I think rules are all going out of the window. So who does the proposing, who pays for the ring, whether you do it together as a couple or whether you do it separately. So I'm seeing this real duality, which is sort of going alongside each other at the moment, which is really interesting.
I'm curious, what's the most kind of interesting design forward you've helped create or helped facilitate with a designer recently?
I'll tell you the most interesting brief that came in. We didn't actually manage to fulfill it. It was so out there, but I had a client come in with a dinosaur bone, a diamond, and a Krugerrand coin, which is like pure gold, and he wanted and a meteorite. And he wanted to mix the meteorite with the gold to create the mount and set the dinosaur bone and the diamond into the ring. Unfortunately, we couldn't find any workshops that were prepared to put the meteorite into their casting system, but that was quite out there.
Wow. Yeah, I have seen dinosaur bone fossils in I really can't think of who, but like in men's wedding bands. I have seen that, but yes, that's pretty out there. And any other bridal trends of note for you ladies?
I mean, definitely, I think the individualized, personalized, I think being part of the journey. I think Beanie really nailed a lot of the main things that jewelers and designers should be doing, is having that accessible to their customers. So whether it's through meetings, virtual meetings or appointments, or if it's an actual builder on their platform or their website where you can be a part of that process. I think it's important for customers to understand where everything came from. So that sustainability aspect of it is really, really key. It is often the first big fine jewelry purchase for a lot of first time, I guess, marriage people. So it's important for them to, they've heard a lot of things and so they start doing their research. And so they want to know that whatever that they're purchasing comes from that. And I think that's a real important thing that a jeweler should be educating their customers on where they're sourcing their products, where they're sourcing their metals. I think there's a lot of great designers that use recycled metals and recycled diamonds in their products, and they really tell that story. And I also think it's really important to tell the made to order, especially if there's a customization aspect. I don't think people want to buy like off the rack. They want their ring to feel like it wasn't just like cookie cutter. They kind of want to feel like they had some inputs. And so making sure they understand how that comes into play and being part of the journey is really, really crucial. And then I would say unisex. I think that there's a lot of bands that are kind of going back and forth, that it could go for, it's not gender specific or anything. I think there's a lot more fluidity in all of that.
I love that.
I think too, Ashley, to throw in there as an aside is the huge market for resets. I think that's like a major thing that's going on right now. People, want to kind of get a redo if they didn't like their initial design or it's fallen out of fashion. And I think that's become a massive market right now. And it's something certainly that both designers and stores can really capitalize on, in terms of offering that as a solution, offering that as a way to update and to maybe follow some of these trends we're talking about. So we've seen that as kind of a major thing, is just thinking of a different way, and I think it just keeps the customer engaged, as always, reminding them that jewelry, while it is an investment, you can make changes. It's a material that allows you to update. It allows you to refresh. It allows you to, play around with it. And those materials still last, still exist, and still are worth something. So, I think it's just a great way to continue engaging a customer and keeping them informed in whether it's an engagement ring or redoing old, your grandmother's ring or anything along those lines, that it's just another way to keep someone kind of shopping.
Yeah. And then you get that wonderful bespoke luxury experience of working with a designer, which is just, so rare if you haven't, if you're not used to shopping in the fine jewelry market, which is so cool. Before we open it up to audience questions, I just want to ask one last really general question about any other trends that you think are going to be big in 2021, or any that you feel are really on their way out?
I think, again, to bit of a buzzword today, but use the word duality. I think with the pandemic, there's been appetite certainly here for shopping local. That's been spurred on by supporting fellow citizens, supporting local trade, not being able to travel. And I think that goes for jewelers too. Maybe they're looking for suppliers that are closer to home. And at the same time, you're seeing people who are shopping globally. And that is because now we are so comfortable to jump on our computers, FaceTime, Zoom, WhatsApp. And it's kind of blown everything right open. I mean, the competition is huge now because I can be living in Mexico City and working with a designer in London, and I can invite those designers into my home. And, the same with WhatsApp, I can slip into the inboxes of my clients amongst their friends and their families. It's very informal. And so I think the technology was always there. I think the pandemic has allowed us to explore it in a way that now everyone feels comfortable, both the industry and the client. And I think it's super exciting that people are selling, hundreds and thousands and millions of pounds worth of jewelry from their homes.
Definitely.
I think we touched on this just a little bit, but to go back to pearls as a category, that's something that's just really trending right now. Obviously, there was so much press and so much talk about the inauguration and our new vice president and all of, I think this has all been, it's actually been leading up to this, and that's why I wear my pearls today. There's been a real major return, and I think very contemporary designers are doing a great job reimagining pearls, making them feel modern, making them, exciting for a younger customer. There's a great, as well, entry price point to freshwater pearls where you can get a relatively big look for not a ton of money. So I think an investment in that for this coming year and for holiday is a really good idea for people to keep in mind when they're purchasing for their stores or designing for their brands.
Okay, great.
And I think the other big important trend is to be staying affront of what your clients are, how they're shopping and the way that they're shopping, and providing them products to complement whatever is happening in their lives. I also think story is still so important. So your brand story, your brand ethos, your value proposition, your point of view as a designer or as a retailer, really explaining that and being true to your customer. Not every customer is going to be your customer, or every consumer out there. So really honing in on who that is, and also being part of your customers' journey and their story and helping them build their collections. Randi had a lot of really great takeaways, instead of Beanie, about just how you can work with your customers to personalize and give them the right things. So story, it's all about that. And I think enhancing it and making it more clear as to what that is. And if I'm going to give one takeaway, it's Pinterest is, I know Instagram's where it's at, you know, in terms of sales and stuff, but Pinterest is an amazing referral opportunity. Pinterest for Business, if you go on there, they actually did their 2021, what's it called, like predictions. And so they outlined all of these different predictions, but they're geared actually for businesses to look, and it will explain some kind of trend, like one that they said, they called it rain brow. So like very colorful eyebrows, you know, we are kind of doing this. So to stand out, people, you know, they think a rainbow or like a purple eyebrow is going to be the thing. And how can jewelers, how can designers, how can retailers incorporate that? They can put that into their lookbooks. They could add that into their social media feeds. So when you're looking at trends, not just from the design standpoint of your actual products, but thinking about how you're going to style, how you're going to merchandise, and how you're going to market to your customers, you know, look into Pinterest and other places where your customers may be shopping, and make sure that you're kind of staying abreast to that. So that's my biggest thing on trends, is just see what else is out there. Get out of your bubble. Check out what's happening in beauty and travel and whatever.
No, that's such a good point, not to just be in the fine jewelry vacuum. And Jen wrote a great article about Pinterest for us recently. So if you go to nationaljeweler.com, go in our search bar for Jen Cullen Williams. It should be our the most recent result, because she does a little column for us there. Thank you so much, ladies. I'll turn it over to Michelle now so that she can get to some questions from the audience.
Okay, thank you all so much. I knew that would be great, and it did not disappoint. And thanks to our sponsor, Rdi Diamonds. As a reminder for our attendees, you can still type questions into the Zoom Q&A box, and I'll try to get to as many as possible. Some of them got answered during the course of the discussion, but we've had many more come in, and we had many submitted beforehand. I'm going to give people a couple more minutes to enter questions, and I'm just going to say a quick word about Rdi Diamonds. Rdi Diamonds, the selection you want, the quality you need. Thousands of diamonds, that's just the beginning. RDI offers a wide range of services and support to help you succeed, from flexible memo options and a partnership with De Beers Group Industry Services to generous stock options and cost-efficient shipping. RDI's goal is to provide the highest quality of both care and diamonds to your store. Visit rdidiamonds.com today to learn more. That is rdidiamonds.com. Now let's get started with our listener questions. The question we definitely got the most frequently, both during the session and before, people want to get your thoughts on lab-grown diamonds, big category in the industry now, big topic, and how you see those fitting into the market, particularly as they pertain to jewelry trends. So whoever wants to jump in with that one.
I think there's a market for it. There's a consumer that wants a diamond, maybe doesn't have the budget for a mined diamond, or has other rationale for wanting a lab grown. So I definitely think it's smart. I don't think it's for every single jeweler to incorporate a lab grown into their mix. If it's not their brand ethos, if that's not it, then don't do it. Don't just jump on it just to have it. But I do think that the consumer demand, I don't think consumers totally understand the difference between a lab grown and a mined diamond, but I think it's confusing. I think the name lab sounds terrible. It just doesn't, it's not romanced at all. But there are consumers that are finding out about it. There's been a lot of articles and things like that, and there is going to be a market for it. I don't think it will take over the mined market though.
I'll add, I don't think it's a trend in designer fine jewelry. I don't think there are really brands that talk about that or really align themselves with lab-grown diamonds. We'll see maybe a special collaboration, little mini capsule collection here and there, and then we'll see the same thing with people supporting mined diamonds. So I think it's most prevalent in the bridal market because people are looking to save money. I really think so. And then a small contingent want to support jewelry that wasn't mined. But I think the most important thing that designers can do, whether they're working with lab grown or with mined diamonds, is just to talk about why they use them. So if you're using mined diamonds and, you know, a client's asking you about them, to talk about that, you know, where these diamonds come from, and, you know, maybe you know, or hopefully you do know something about the community where they come from and the miners that it supports. Just as long as you know how to explain your process, I think that at this moment, that's the most important thing.
Randi, that I see you reaching for the unmute on this one, or no?
This isn't really my category, to be honest with you. I don't personally work with any lab grown. It's just as Ashley, I think, really beautifully put it. I think it's all about the brand and their ethos and what they choose to do. And I think she nailed it. If you, whichever way you go, just make sure you know what you're talking about with your client. They might have questions. It'd be great if they did have questions, and you should have the answers for them regardless. So as long as you have a great way of speaking about and educating your client on what your choice is, I think is really the most important.
Okay, thank you so much. Here's a really good question we got beforehand. Post-isolation, you know, I don't know if that's going to happen this summer, next fall, when everyone starts to go out again. Is there going to be an increase in demand for more pronounced and more kind of statement type of pieces? Because are people really going to want to come out with something big and bold and really kind of be out there just because people are missing it? I mean, not everyone, but I think a lot of people are missing it. Thoughts on statement jewelry becoming more prevalent post-isolation?
I mean, I'm here for it. I'm unmuted, so I'm here for it. I think that I have constantly talked about, you know, this return to the roaring 20s. People wanting to go out, people wanting to get dressed up, people really making an effort, going for it. Look, I'm sick of sitting in my house and not getting dressed. So I will certainly be the first one to put on like my biggest earrings and my biggest necklace and all my cocktail rings at the same time. And I actually really, I believe that. I believe that people are going to want to kind of bring out the big guns when they have the opportunity to do so. And I absolutely, not only do I think that will happen, I think it's a great way to support this industry in general. And I think people are they're gonna hop on the statement jewelry bandwagon for sure.
Yeah, I would agree with everything you said. And I also think that we were kind of like, aside from the pandemic, going that way anyway. I think the sort of demi-fine category, small, you know, very delicate pieces have been, well, they kind of came in really, didn't they, around the sort of 2008 recession. And I think there is and has been a growing appetite for pieces that really make a statement, that can be worn on their own or mixed with other pieces that really stand out. And I think at the moment we don't see that being dampened at all by what's going on.
And I would also add, in the fashion industry, we're seeing a lot of really bold dresses and gowns, even though there's not a lot going on, but people preparing for their future wedding or that kind of thing. So I think of Needle and Thread, the UK designer brand. It's really big, puffy, amazing dresses, and the show on Netflix, there's 2 shows on Netflix that make me want to wear a lot more jewelry. One is Bridgerton, and then the other one is Bling Empire. So there was really bold jewelry on both. They were completely different series and all of that, but I think that we're seeing that kind of surge of big glam, and both in fashion and high couture markets. And so hopefully we'll have a lot of places and things to wear our bold pieces and gowns and all of that fun stuff.
And don't forget, it is a K-shaped recovery. We've got some people doing not great, some people doing just fine. So A lot of fine jewelry buyers are ready to bring out their stuff.
Yeah, a lot of fine jewelry buyers definitely on the top arm of that K, so to speak. Somebody wants to know, is vintage jewelry trending? And I guess a broader question, is vintage jewelry always trending? Or is there particularly heightened interest in it right now? Anyone have any thoughts on that?
I think there's a pretty huge interest in it right now. And I think that's, I see a direct correlation with social media and the kind of re-rise of vintage jewelry, because there's a lot of really fantastic personalities in the vintage jewelry world on Instagram and elsewhere, who are really championing the, things of the past, whether it's sign pieces or just really cool one-offs. I think also so many designers are quick to point out that their inspiration maybe came from an era or a piece of vintage jewelry as well, which helps reignite the interest of the consumer to look back and say, oh, what they're into Art Deco jewelry. What does Art Deco jewelry from, look like? And so I think those things kind of coupled together have really seen it surge. And I think it's great. It's great as an educational tool, regardless, to show people where things came from and show the cyclical nature of jewelry. And then, as Jen said, like shows like Bridgerton or The Crown, I think also like pique people's interest, and they're looking at that and they're saying, oh, that looks cool, or I would maybe wear that. And so I think there's a lot more opportunity to easily learn more, whether it's via watching TV or on social media. And I think it's just kind of helped vintage jewelry explode. And a lot of retailers offer their own selection of vintage jewelry right now, which is not a bad move at all. I think it's also a great way to introduce price points, charms, all kinds of things that allow you to offer a little curated section in your store that may be the thing that draws somebody in. And there's a sustainability, angle from it as well.
That was exactly what I was going to say, is that the whole thread up movement is happening big time in the fashion industry, because the fashion industry in general is not sustainable. People are buying clothes, fashion, and then they throw it away, a month later. And so there's this kind of movement. I mean, you even see it as far as H&M, which is like the most fast fashion that you can think of, now has a category on their website that's called sustainability. And they're recycling materials and things like that. So the vintage goes very much in line with that. But then also there's the provenance of the history of it and what's happening in pop culture based on what we're watching and consuming. And I think, using platforms like TikTok and all of that, these video opportunities to create really cool, fun snippet education on like, hey, here's my blah, blah, blah. And this is how it, this is where it came from. And this is the period, da, 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 da. And you can do it so snappy and so quick using social media that you can educate your consumer in 7 seconds, 15 seconds, whatever, and they may actually be very interested in buying that piece. So I think it's a smart move. I think it's doing well. I work with a couple vintage related companies. Technology is starting to come into play in the jewelry space for trading vintage, which historically was always just in person. And I think having that digital space for dealers and retailers to connect, there's going to be more opportunities to actually bring some great products to customers that they wouldn't have elsewhere been able to find.
All right. So we're running out of time here, but I did want to get in one last question. We had one listener who wants a little bit of elaboration about trends on the way out. So everyone could talk a little bit about a trend they see being on the way out, but this listener specifically asked, would you consider rose gold engagement rings on the way out?
I would say, I'm trying to think, probably about 5 years ago, we were seeing a lot of people asking for rose gold. I didn't get one request last year for a rose gold engagement ring. So I would say yes. But that said, there are people who love rose gold in the same way people love yellow gold. I think for some people, it's down to, you know, their skin tone or culturally what they like, or what they sort of love within their families. So I don't think it's necessarily something that shouldn't be offered, because I think there are always consumers for it. But, you know, as we've already mentioned, the yellow gold category is strongest.
Go ahead, Randi.
I haven't really seen very, very few requests for rose recently, unless it's someone has a particular color gemstone that it would work perfectly with. Outside of that, it's been pretty rare for me that I can think of over the last year or two that there's been more than a few rose gold requests at all. So take from that what you will, I guess.
And any thoughts on a trend that's on the way out, Randi?
It's a great question, Michelle. I'm not sure. You know, I think I am, as we said before, and I know it was a question that was brought up by Ashley. I'm curious to see what will happen with this enamel, this vivid enamel thing that's going on, which I think is cool, and I think certainly pressworthy and eye-catching, and there's designers who are doing very cool contemporary things with it. I'm curious if that's going to stick around or not. I guess jury's out. But I think also just what Beanie said about more of the demi-fine and that kind of stuff. We have found that the tiny pieces in our designers' collections are great as entry things, but really what we're seeing the most success with are the bigger statement pieces right now.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. Jen, any thought on something that's on the way out?
Not being online and selling direct to consumer, or at least having a really strong online presence. I think that's on the way out. I mean, maybe there's a few like really high profile designers that are always going to just be private and hard to get to. But I think if you're kind of in the middle of the road, even of high end, it still should have a presence. And I think also, I mean, this isn't totally design related, but just making sure your brand story and what you say and put out there in social media and in the public is really aligned with who you are as a company. I've just seen a lot of cancel culture happen with everything going on in the world, because brands have done things and it's a lot easier to get called out. So I think a trend is really being authentic to who you are as a design. Also, you know, being very mindful of not knocking off other designers. I've seen some sort of fashion-based kind of demi-fine companies knocking off very high-end designers who've worked very hard to build their brands. And, you know, I don't think they're listening to this, but it's not cool. I know there's always crossover. There's not a lot of space to design, and sometimes it will happen, but there's some really, really obvious direct knockoffs that are happening out there and offering at really low price points. And I think, I hope for this industry, it's just not cool to knock off something blatantly. And so hopefully I say that's not a trend. That is not cool, and don't do it. So those are my random things, not really related to design, but.
Can we get in one last question from Dahlia? Hi, Dahlia. She's asking if you guys are seeing a difference in what people buy for themselves versus what people gifting buy, and what that difference is overall.
I mean, I think this interestingly kind of comes to what we were talking about before about personalization. I think people are really find personalized for themselves, and then for gifting, maybe going a slightly different route, looking for things that are maybe brand specific but not personalized. And so just like something that's a telltale piece of a brand that is something that they think someone would like. And then for themselves, I think people are looking to customize a little bit more. However that may be, I think there's maybe that difference there between gifting and self-purchase.
I would say in the engagement ring space, if if the couple are buying the piece together and the person who's going to be wearing the ring is involved, then they tend to sort of push the design concept, push the materials, maybe be a bit more sort of bold or experimental with what they're choosing, versus someone who's maybe choosing it as a gift, as a surprise, maybe tends to play it a bit more safe, which I think is probably the same across all categories, really. If you're choosing it for someone else, you can't always be so daring unless you know that person's style inside and out.
Yeah, that makes sense. Very good point. So Jen, did you speak on this already? I'm sorry.
I think I ditto with everything that they said on that.
Okay. I just didn't want to cut you off in case you wanted to say something.
I can talk to walls. Yeah.
Jen, Randi, Beanie, thank you so much. This was a great discussion today, and I'm so happy you all could join us from different time zones. You can tune in, and Ashley, thank you so much for hosting. You can tune in for another episode of My Next Question next Thursday. That'll be February 4th already at 11 a.m. Eastern. I will be interviewing Bill Boyajian and Glenn Ballard about succession planning, which is a big topic in the jewelry industry. There's a lot of jewelers considering retirement, so that's of interest to a lot of people. And you can read more about it and register at nationaljeweler.com/webinars. So thanks again to our panelists, to Ashley, and to everyone who joined us today. And please take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.